You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinezic.
Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast. We're back with a rooted discussion episode, and this is presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I am Tom Kinezic. Welcome to episode 80, which that's another milestone.
I'm waiting for that 100.
Yeah, I guess
I keep waiting for us to get canceled before that happens. I'm like, oh, we're one closer.
But yeah, today we're joined by Kate Unkaya and Shannon Curry. Talk about green roofs, which has been shockingly hard for me to spell. I keep wanting to make it like hooves. I want to spell it with a V and an E and an S at the end, and then I had to look it up eventually. It's like, no, my brain is playing tricks on me. It is ROOFS.
One of the things I love about this podcast, and I love so many things about it, is, and we've mentioned this probably a million times, that when we started it, we had a list of topics and guests that we wanted to have on, and we still haven't gone through that initial list of like 10 to 20 people. And we keep going off on different tangents and topics as it becomes relevant to the podcast, or just we become curious to learn more. And I'm going to have to start paying Daryl Kabeski commission, because this was a finder's fee, because this is, besides being a former guest, this is the second recommendation he gave us of what he thought would be good. And we agreed. And fortunately, everyone was willing to meet with us on such short notice. So we're excited.
Yeah. So I've learned through a lot through 80 episodes, but one thing I've learned is I'm terrible giving the introductions. So I tend to let the guests introduce themselves a little bit. So Kate, why don't we start with you and tell us who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on episode 80. I'd rather be on episode 100, but I'll be okay with 80. So
it's going to be a star-studded spectacular.
It'll be a clip show.
You could be a part of it. Everyone's invited.
Okay. Well, thank you. So again, my name is Kate Unkaya. I'm a landscape architect and co-founder of Living Roofs Inc., which is a design build company. We're based in North Carolina. We opened the company in Raleigh, North Carolina, and moved it to Asheville shortly after. We design and build green roofs across the Southeast, and really excited to be here and talk about plants and learn from true plants people. Again, I'm a designer, not a horticulturalist, but learning a lot and loving the exploration of plants and green infrastructure.
Awesome. And Shannon, how about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Well, like Kate, I'm very happy to be here. And I'm the marketing director for Hoffman Nursery. And so we're a nursery that specializes in grasses and grass-like plants based in central North Carolina. And the nursery has been in business since 1986. So 35 plus years of growing a pretty narrow range of plants. And I've been with the company almost 15 years. And one of the great joys for me of my job is promoting plants and what they do for us, both, in terms of health and well-being, the environment, the whole shooting match, and green infrastructure is a big part of that. So understanding how plants can be part of nature-based systems to solve problems and bring all that joy. So that's kind of my job, which is pretty wonderful. And we've worked with Living Roofs. We've supplied plants with them for a while and have really enjoyed that relationship. And I have learned a ton about green roofs and working with companies like Kate's.
And that really leads us into a first question, which is, what is a green roof? I'm sure there's plenty of people who are familiar with that or have at least seen one, but
or maybe there's multiple definitions.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. So we're hoping that you can kind of lead us in the right direction with that answer.
Sure. So a green roof is just as it sounds. It's vegetation on a roof. And the green roof assembly, how we talk about it, or the build up, there's a lot of different ways to build a green roof, but basically on all green roofs, the assembly starts above the roofing or waterproofing membrane. And then it's a series of of layers. I'll give an example for a traditional built-up system, but not to make it too confusing, but there are a lot of ways to build a green roof, a lot of different products out there, but most of them are composed of the same layers, which again, you have your membrane or roofing membrane layer, and then the green roof starts above that. You have a membrane protection layer, or a root barrier, as sometimes we call it, a drainage layer, and sometimes that's like a mat or some sort of drainage aggregate with or without a water retention, and then a filter fabric, and then the growing media, and then that is can be a variety of depths, and then the plants, the fun part. And the growing media and the base components really influence the types of plants that you can grow on that particular system. Awesome. And one thing to point out is that the growing media is different than regular garden soil. So we use a really lightweight, very coarse soil composed of different aggregates, fines, and compost. But that soil depth and the composition really influences which plant species will thrive up there.
Awesome. Before we go into more specifics, which we're going to do, one of the things that I love that's kind of been a common theme on the podcast, we always talk about what we're losing in nature, like the land that we've lost and overdevelopment. But I've also come to really appreciate, instead of focusing on what we're losing, is what we've reclaimed. And we've had episodes where we talked about a nature sanctuary at West Laurel Hill Cemetery, where they're going against conventional burial sites and making a meadow, or Monarchs in the Rough with Audubon International, where they're getting golf courses to actually become part of the solution instead of being a ecological wasteland, to put these meadows in and steward them and help be part of the solution with pollinators. And it's land that we lost that we don't think about, that there's a way to actually get it back. And this falls in that category when you think of pervious surfaces and what we're losing, that you're getting green back. And I love that. So we thought maybe we can go in some of the benefits of having a green roof and what those might be.
Sure. Green roofs, just like a lot of green infrastructure applications, have a tremendous amount of benefits, and we call them co-benefits, because as opposed to, you brought up, or as we're talking about green infrastructure, we compare that often to gray infrastructure, right? Which is a single purpose system. It does one thing, and green infrastructure can do one thing, but it can also have all these other co-benefits or provide all these other ecosystem services. So as we're designing green roofs, and we'll take an example of a project that is incorporating a green roof for stormwater, right? We need to reduce the amount of stormwater coming off the building. We also need to reduce the rate in which that water is leaving the building. So we're meeting a stormwater ordinance, or using the green roof as a stormwater control measure. But we're also getting, whether the client cares or not, we're also getting enormous boost in biodiversity. We're getting cooler surface temperatures. The roof, when covered in a green roof, or a sidewalk that has been, the edges have been depaved and we've incorporated bioswales or rain gardens, or we're depaving parts of parking lots. Anytime that we're using plants in the urban environment, we're reducing the temperature of that surface. And so that has an immediate impact to a building, for example, lowering cooling costs. But we also need to think about it in terms of the broader community benefit of what that means to have cooler temperatures in our cities, so combating urban heat island effect. So I can run through the benefits of green roofs, and I'll do that, but I like to give these more specific examples too. And so, in terms of environmental benefits, definitely reducing stormwater and improving water quality, and reducing the impact on our receiving waterways by having less stormwater and slowing the rate of stormwater runoff. Increased biodiversity that provides food and habitat for our local pollinator species, but also supporting our migratory songbirds or pollinators as they move through our cities, reducing urban temperatures, improving air quality, plants capturing and filtering out pollutants in the air. And again, thinking about how as we increase vegetation in our cities, whether they're street trees, the original green infrastructure, I like to call the street trees that, we can begin to see the impact that we have beyond a particular project. And then, some of the economic benefits, which to be quite honest, are the reason that people are incorporating green roofs into our cities and communities, are reducing or extending the lifespan of the roofing membrane. So we talked about the layers of the green roof. And so when you think about universities or municipalities or hospitals that own a lot of roof, extending the lifespan of that roofing membrane makes economic sense. So, for example, typically a flat roof, a waterproofing membrane needs to be replaced every 15 to 20 years. That's just the cost of building. Everyone just accepts that cost. Well, if you cover it with a green roof, we're looking at over 50 years of a lifespan of that original membrane. And that's because the conditions that break down that membrane material are insulated, or are the green roof protects the membrane from those conditions. So UV rays break down those plastics in the waterproofing membrane, but when it's covered with a green roof, the UV ray can't penetrate to that membrane. Exposure to huge fluctuations in temperature. So a roof heats up a lot during the day, well over 100 degrees, cools down at night. So that fluctuation in temperature over time breaks down those materials. And so by covering a membrane with a green roof, we have a consistent ambient temperature of that rooftop. And so again, that waterproofing membrane does not degrade as quickly. And we say 50 years at minimum, and that's because that's all the data we have right now, because that's how old modern green roof technology is in Europe. So they're pulling back these 50-year-old green roofs and finding those membranes in really great condition because they've been protected all these years. So when you think about, a lot of someone who owns a lot of building, the economic benefit or the life cycle cost is really tremendous, can be tremendous. And then here in the Southeast, another economic benefit is just reduced costs associated with cooling our buildings. Awesome. And then, of course, managing stormwater. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but we worked on a project in Asheville that used the green roof specifically to avoid having to incorporate underground stormwater storage. And so the green roof acted as a stormwater control measure. They did not have to spend a lot of money and for a very expensive, great infrastructure system, and not just to incorporate that system, but then also to take care of it over time. That's very expensive to maintain those underground stormwater chambers. So the green roof saved money in that respect. But this is a great example of it accomplishing that one economic benefit, but then we're getting all these great environmental benefits too. And then, of course, social benefits associated with increased access to views of nature, increased access to small nature experiences in our urban center, in our urban areas. And so those are sort of the main benefits, but there is an enormous list that Green Roofs for Healthy Cities. If you want to learn more about green roofs and their benefits, they have a very comprehensive list.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, this is probably not the best question. What's the downside of a green roof?
Yeah, so I'm not the right person to ask that because, but I would say some of the challenges associated with green roofs are they're heavier than a regular roof system. So for new construction, we can work around that. We can design the roof to hold, or the structure to hold that additional weight. For existing buildings, that can be a real challenge because it can be expensive to retrofit the structure of a building to hold a green roof. And then the initial cost is more than a conventional roof, but you recover that cost, and then the return on investment grows as you move away from that initial installation. So I would say that those are two of the main challenges. And then I guess the third challenge is that green roofing in the Southeast is not that, hasn't been around that long. And so it can be challenging to educate and help people incorporate the right system for their project. Green roofs are still considered this sort of off-the-shelf thing that, oh, there's only one way to build a green roof, or I'm going to put a tray on my roof and that's a green roof. So there's definitely some work to do in terms of education and outreach.
I love that as you were talking, I was furiously writing new questions. And then as I was writing them, you were answering them. So I'm just writing down, crossing off.
Well, I can see your notebook.
I have a lot more to ask too. But no, it's, because I was thinking of things like water quality. I'm thinking of rain hitting a rooftop and all the pollutants that it's picking up, the impervious surface, where it's going. You answered so many of these questions as we were going lifespan. But then I was thinking, Shannon, like how did Hoffman Nurseries find this part of the business? And like, how did you start supplying this? And over time, are you seeing an increase of how much your business is dedicated towards this type of infrastructure?
That's a great question, Fran. And as Kate was talking toward the end there about some of the challenges, some of it, I think, is this interplay within the industry and understanding that many nurseries are already growing plants that are appropriate for some of these applications of green infrastructure, like green roofs or rain gardens. And for us at Hoffman Nursery, it really grew out of a focus probably 15 years ago on functionality. And sort of as people got more and more interested in having their landscapes do more ecologically, it was sort of moving beyond the aesthetic. And that pretty plants, recognizing that there was a real role that we could play in making, moderating or mitigating the effects of increased development. So low impact development. And so as that became something we were really interested in, and grasses, I love grasses. They're not the easy sell sometimes, that something that flowers or is much more obvious to people were. So for us, that push toward functionality and like, these are plants that are easy to care for, that they have a lot of ecological value, that's a good balance. So we were talking about function, and then more and more it became clear that green infrastructure. So the idea is, as Kate alluded to, gray infrastructure. So, using some sort of, a ditch or, built structures, concrete, managing stormwater in those traditional ways started to morph more into using natural systems. And so we realized, wow, there are a lot of our plants that fit that model. So we started getting more and more interested in, are we growing plants that are appropriate for this? And we really were. There are particularly a lot of our native species of grasses that are really well adapted to some of those conditions, which we can talk about on a green roof or in bioswales or bioretention. And yes, that's been a much bigger part of our plant palette and our sales. We kept getting landscape contractors coming to us saying, I need plants for bioretention, or I need plants for a green roof. And they had no idea what were the right plants. So they looked to us for recommendations, and that got us realizing, we've got to pay attention. There's a market here for one thing, and also this is an opportunity to understand better how our grasses fit into green infrastructure and how we can be growing plants that, promote better living for all of us. So it's been kind of a gradual journey for us.
And I can
imagine.
And
I would say that follow up on that, I think it's been a collaborative journey too, because we've been working with Hoffman for over 10 years. And just like a month ago, I was on the phone with Jessica chatting about a grass I wanted to try for this particular project. And so many of our as we've been experimenting with grasses, you have been such a your company has been such a resource, and other nurseries as well. But really, I always like to talk about the resource that nurseries provide, because so often, especially in the wholesale industry, you're just supposed to put your order in and pick it up, and you just think of, I don't know, I just think that there's so much information that you all have that really benefit designers. And so the designers need to be reaching out more and asking the right questions.
Well, the best results always occur when it's a partnership instead of client customer. It's really collaborative, and that's where I think in any instance you see the best results, and that's wonderful to hear, because that means good work is being done, which you can't ask for more than that. Mm-hmm. I was actually kind of thinking, and this can be for both of you, I guess I would, and I'm going way off. I'm all over the place here, and I apologize. You're creating a natural setting in an unnatural environment. And in a previous life for me, and working with New York City parks, you realize for as much as you love natives, you're putting something in an unnatural condition. So that's not always, you need something that it may not necessarily have time to evolve. It has to adapt right away. So I understand the need where, I'm sure some natives are great, but you need a lot of cultivars and varieties to make that happen because of the conditions. How much stewardship occurs with this once it's done to make sure? I know there has to be a lot of prep for all the right things to make sure that it happens. But once it happens, I would imagine it's not maintenance free.
No, it's not. And we like to compare the maintenance on green roofs as just like any sort of maintenance on other building systems. There is, I always like this question because I have the opportunity to dispel the myth of green roofs as being these like overly highly maintained systems. And to be honest, that it's very minimal if they're designed correctly. I mean, this is really where it comes down to making sure that you're selecting plants that work in the depth of the soil that the green roof has, choosing the right plants for a geographic region, and then a planting approach that is going to accomplish what the project goals are. So if you have a green roof that is part of a rooftop amenity space, say it's a restaurant or an outdoor patio, that's designed very similar to something at grade, and there's an exacting aesthetic because the client wants there to be a very formal design, the maintenance on that will be different than the maintenance on a wild meadow roof that no one is sitting at staring at the plants. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, and this is the part that always bothers me about when I see green roof designs. It's like, we don't have to design every green roof the same. It really depends on what the project goals are. And if it's a rooftop that no one is seeing, that is strictly performing environmental and economic functions, then it doesn't have to be an English garden with very fussy plants. It could be a true plant community that is thriving in those conditions. And so the maintenance can be as much or as little as you want. And that really comes down to what people are willing to look at and tolerate. We really made a shift in how we were designing our green roofs about 5 or 6 years ago, and really planting a variety of plants, cool season, warm season grasses, as well as native and ornamental perennials, and really increasing the density in which we were planting. And that has really helped keep the maintenance to a minimum, because we don't have large areas of open soil for weeds to come in. Well, we have proper soil depth, so a lot of different plants can thrive. And we are using a high diversity of plants so they can move around and find the right places and the right conditions that they like. So we really see these as systems or plant communities, as opposed to static sort of plants that just sit and behave in a certain way.
Is there, all right, Tom, after this one, you got to get me back on track. Is there, because I want to go back take a couple steps back because I feel like I'm jumping ahead. But has there been a design or a project that was more successful than you had thought that people looked at and was like, wow, maybe it was a little out of the box or something that you didn't expect to be received as well as it was?
There's a couple projects like that, and they all happened when we made that.
we were waiting for that.
On cue.
She's really excited about those projects too. And those projects happened when we made that shift to sort of designing our designing our planting approach, really. And honestly, my fingers were crossed. I was like, I hope this works out. And it was when we started designing very diverse sort of ground covered layer plant communities that then supported more of like an accent layer or a seasonal layer of plants. And so sort of these more, and some of them, they were more of a stylized meadow if they were visible from other rooftops. And others are just a very diverse sort of native plant community. And we didn't do that before. We were working mostly with sedum and succulent species, maybe mixing in a couple perennials here and there, like Coreopsis. Like, okay, we know that this is a great green roof plant, but in the Southeast, a lot of those sedums and succulents, they don't like the humidity. And so when we started testing out new plants and just sort of, we had a lot of projects where we had free rein to kind of try things out. We started seeing these patterns. And then when we there was one or two projects where we really made a shift and just went all in with this new approach. And we were very excited. And these projects have won awards. And it was having, it was learning from the plants. It was, taking the time to experiment and then having the courage to try something new.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in for a second and say Kate, in talking about this, I think there are real parallels between a lot of the planting design that's gone on recently in recent years, probably the last decade with, the Dutch wave and planting, going with matrix plantings, for example, and that layered approach that, Thomas Rayner and Claudia West really laid out clearly for all of us in planting in a post-wild world. Also, the work that's being done with gravel gardens, and coming from Europe, Beth Chatto's gardens and the work they've done in Europe, and then seeing that translated here in the U.S., where a green roof to me is not dissimilar to that gravel garden environment, where you're challenging plants and choosing plants that do well in that very difficult environment, and that also helps with weed suppression and competition. So you're putting on their plants that thrive in that environment. And the parallel there is too, as well, as Kate said, for good plant selection. And one of the difficulties, I think, especially in the Southeast, for people adopting green roofs is the lack of expertise in our industry yet. We're working on it, but that's why it's so exciting to have companies like Living Roofs doing that. And there are other companies in other parts of the country too doing this, but it's, I think it to me kind of is paralleling what's happening in progressive planting design as well.
So what I wanted to kick back to is we talked about that like parfait of materials that you have on the roof, right? How thick is that? Like I'm thinking about like a commercial rooftop and just wondering how thick are all those layers that go on top?
Did the buildup of the green roof?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not that thick. They're not that thick at all. So what going with the plants, I'll work actually from the plants down. And so here in the Southeast, we use we try and propose a 6-inch growing media depth. Because that really opens up the variety of plant species that we can grow. And then I would say with all the other, depending on the buildup, with all the other materials, you're looking at maybe another inch and a half or 2 inches.
Okay.
So not that much. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
when you
again,
started
it just
listing off
depends
all
on
these
the,
things, I'm
the
like, is this
products.
like 3 feet?
No,
No, 6 inches thick. That's really not a lot of space to work with. And I'm sure you're saying 6 inches of media would open up your plant palette, but there's
yes.
still only a certain, not that many things that'll grow in that little amount of soil. What?
Or would we be
Yeah.
surprised?
Yeah,
I think
maybe-
you'd be
maybe I'm-
surprised. I think I'm surprised. And I kind of like to see plants adapt to that, and they may not get as tall as they would in a garden at grade, but that's okay too. They may be a little stunted, but there are so many plants that thrive in that soil horizon. And then we do have opportunities. We've incorporated like topography or like berms into the growing media to support deeper rooting plants, or if we wanted to incorporate shrubs or even small trees, we've done that as well. But the soil depth is really what determines the plants that you can grow on a green roof.
Right. And there are levels in, some people tend to divide green roofs into sort of extensive and intensive, and that's more of a continuum. I think, Kate, would you agree maybe 6 inches or less might be extensive? There are green roofs that are basically, planters that are much deeper, but that's a different set of parameters.
Yeah. So we could, there are some pre-vegetated systems that we can go very, very thin for buildings that can't hold the additional weight, down to like a 2-inch system with a pre-vegetated mat system. But these can be they're more expensive, but we can go as thin as that here in the Southeast. And then in the Northeast, we can go even thinner, but we'll talk about the Southeast. That's where we are. And then, yes, you can go all from there. You just, as you get deeper soil, you increase your planting options. Here in the mountains, we can get away with 4 or 5 inches of growing media and quite a variety of plants. But then off the mountain, down in South Carolina, in the Piedmont and coastal plain, we definitely have hotter temperatures, and so really try and land on that, that 6-inch system,
And
or deeper. And then, of course, you can add deeper soil in certain areas. You could incorporate planters, as Shannon alluded to. We worked on a project recently up in Virginia where we were putting 10-foot tall redbud trees on a 10th floor roof. And it's really fun to see trees flying through the air on cranes. And they're so cute as they're like just on their first flight. And then they get planted up there. So it's amazing what we can do on these structures. But going back to Fran's point, these are atypical settings for plants. And we're really asking a lot for that.
Now, will it vary on soil depth depending on the amount of rainfall in a specific area? So say like the Pacific Northwest, you're getting X amount of rain a year and you're going to an area that doesn't get the same amount of rain. Does that change your construction with soil depth, knowing how much wetter that could possibly be? I didn't know if that was an issue or not.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the answer to that question. I think about here in the Southeast, one thing to just note, the growing media is really coarse, so it doesn't hold water. It drains very, very quickly.
All right.
So we don't have to worry about ponding or plants getting too soggy or anything like that. But yes, the deeper the soil, the more water it can hold, and the rooting habits of different plants. It also helps stormwater runoff and reducing the peak flow is definitely rated to soil depth. So a green roof that has 6 inches of soil is going to retain a lot more stormwater than a 4-inch or a 2-inch system.
I was going to say one of the parameters for plants that do well too is that what really helps is when you have a plant that will take up a lot of water when it's present, but doesn't necessarily need water all the time to do well. So that's why there are a number of warm season grasses, for example, that have really good capacity to uptake water, but they don't necessarily like to sit in water. But you want, so you know what I mean? You don't want wetland plants, and you don't necessarily want plants that are in super dry environments. You want ones that can take up that water when it's present. This is especially true in the Southeast. And that's why sedums, as Kate alluded to, are really have a rough ride here for us with the humidity levels. And because of their photosynthetic process, don't uptake water quite the same way as, for example, warm season plants do. So it's some of it's balancing those plant selections and the climate and the soil depth, you know.
I was going to say,
Yeah, and the project goals, right?
Yeah.
If we're looking for stormwater, the rooting of the plants is really important. The structure above the soil is really important because their the evapotranspiration rates are higher. And so it really depends on, what the project goals are. And that's the part that I feel like is just always missing about green roof design. It's that we just think about them as one type. We just, there's one way to do it, but we really need to be making our designers think about the green roof like they are on all the other parts of the project, having a proper design process. What are the goals of this? What is the end result? And then how do we design something that is going to meet not just the goals of the project, the budget of the project? I can't tell you how many times we see projects on like a public school building that has like very little funding, but it has specified the most expensive green roof product on the market. And then the green roof doesn't go forward, but we know that they could have designed a green roof that was a tenth of the cost and potentially could have, that building could have had a green roof. But again, that goes back to education and outreach, but also just challenging our designers to think a little bit harder.
How do you educate is that something that you actively do for your business, to educate businesses of what they could have and what the potential is? Or is that something that's lacking generally in green roof technology to the consumer?
That's a good question. We certainly could be doing a better job as a company. We're not an educational institution, but we have found over the years through learning really hard lessons, to be honest, in those early years of the business and designing and building green roofs like they do in Europe and the Northeast and seeing them fail. We decided to start sharing that information. And we do a little bit of outreach and education, but we need to be doing more. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to participate in my very first podcast, because this is a great opportunity to start talking about these things. And so much of the information that's out there, I feel like is really antiquated and just not accurate, and also not tailored to the Southeastern region. Again, it goes back to us thinking that they're all the same. I mean, why am I seeing green roof detailing and designs that are appropriate for Seattle down here in Raleigh, North Carolina?
Yeah,
we're not planting the same plants.
We see it all the time, just in native plant plantings, and people say, well, I'm planting native plants, but are they native to your area? Are they native to, if you're in coastal plain, are you planting Appalachia and Piedmont and expecting the same level of success? There's different areas and there's wetlands, there's uplands, there's everything you have to modify to that. And I would imagine with every condition is different. So every green roof has to be different.
Totally.
And talking about the plants, what are some of the plants that you see a lot in your designs, or you like using in your designs, and that you have a lot of success with?
Well, we've been using a lot of grasses over the past 5 years, 6 years. And there are definitely some sort of greatest hits, or my best buds. And this is where I'll probably mispronounce all the names.
That's okay. We're right with you.
Okay, so one plant that we've been using a lot of is the Probleus. Scoreboard.
Mhm.
How do you say it?
Probleus, you got it.
Oh, right, Probleus.
Heterolepis, yeah.
It's such a great warm season grass, and it has this fine textured, soft quality. And when you see it in a planting on a roof in particular, and the wind is blowing, I mean, it just looks like water in these big swaths. It is stunning, and the color is really great. We really use that a lot. We use a lot of the Caryxes, the Eragrostis spectabilis.
Right.
Spectabilis. Really love that. And, down in the coastal plain, we'll use muley, but I really love the Eragrostis. It has that same pink late season quality, that frothy kind of haze, but it's more appropriate, especially up here in the mountains. So and then a recent one, well, maybe 4 years recent, is the Deschampsia Flexuosa.
Yeah.
I love that plant.
Yeah.
It does so well on our projects, and it's a cool season grass. So early on, it really, it has such a nice color. And those mixtures of cool season and warm season grasses really create a nice backdrop then for the perennials that come and go throughout the season. And then, so I could talk about perennials too, but.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Please do.
Oh yeah, no, these guys do everything, and I'm sure the audience is really familiar with a lot of the perennials that you're going to talk about, Kate.
Yeah, so Coreopsis, a lot of Coreopsis cultivars, they all do really well on green roofs. We use those a lot. The Petrohagia saxifraga is not a native, but we have used that because it tolerates very shallow soils, or not very shallow, but the shallower soils of like a 4-inch system, and it has an evergreen quality, evergreen habit, and has a pretty flower, and really does a great job of covering ground. But back to the perennials, let's see some of our favorites. Rebecchias and Solidagos we use those a lot. Let's see, I'm trying to think of a project that we recently designed.
Kate, would you use any of I'm thinking about the Pycnanthemum genus, but are those so spready? Do you use any of those mint family kinds of plants?
Yes. So I'll get back to that because there's a good story with that one. But the Asclepias tuberosa, we use that a ton on our green roofs. And we try and use that as much as we possibly can, just because of its importance in terms of, monarch butterflies and the biodiversity benefits. But back to the Pycnanthemum, did I say that right?
Pycnanthemum, yep.
Yeah, the mountain mint. So we tried that on this project here in Asheville, North Carolina. We tried a lot of new plants on this particular project, and one of them was the mountain mint. And just because of its benefits for pollinators, this project was really inspired by the fact that Asheville was the first bee city USA. And so a real commitment to pollinators. And so we thought, okay, we're going to design this meadow. Let's really, focus on those types of plants. That's when we tried out the Asclepias, mountain mint. I had no idea what that was going to do, and it has done very well. We tried a Monarda also on that project. That some of the plants, just like at grade landscapes, disappear after a little while. So they're around and then they slowly fade out. The Monardas do not hang around for too long. But the mountain mint was definitely a surprise, and we've used that on other projects, but only up here in the mountains.
So I have a question for both of you, actually, because the mountain mint made me think of this. So by doing a rooftop, you're eliminating some of the possible dangers that you would have on the ground. Like, I'm assuming deer are not an issue on a rooftop, so you don't have to worry about planting for deer resistant plants. But has there been any wildlife interaction that has surprised you other than pollinator, maybe with migrating birds or something that you've either had an issue with or a pleasant surprise with?
There's some funny stories about the critters we find on green roofs. Praying mantis, I'm just shocked at how many praying mantis we find on our roofs and how big they are. I mean, just
Wow.
monsters. So cool to find those. A lot of mostly insects, but on a project down in South Carolina on the coast, we were maintaining a project and there was a fiddler crab up in the muley grass, actually.
Wow, that's well, I was actually thinking
I have a really bad joke about that, but
I was curious if rodents were an issue at
we
all.
We have not seen that. I would say maybe one or two projects there's been like fire ants.
Okay.
But no. Mm-mm.
Do weeds become an issue? Like either
And
like
I'd even expand it to like invasive plants. Do you have like invasive plants that
show up
on these projects?
Yes. Yeah. Not as much as at grade because it is such a contained system.
Right.
And but yes, sometimes there was on a project a really fun project in Raleigh. This project is in an urban canyon because it sees no sun. And so that was a real challenge. We think of green roofs mostly full sun systems. And so we designed this green roof as a forest floor with native plants like Tiarella, Sedum ternatum, native columbine, Mehania cordata. Did I say that right?
I don't know that.
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar.
It's a native ground cover. Anyways, that project is really fun and different. But we've been finding butterfly bush. There was a butterfly bush up there that took root. It wasn't large. It was like a little seedling. And then like a pennisetum or some sort of fountain grass found its way up there, which was strange because they certainly, we did not plant them, but I don't know if they came in the growing media or if by seed.
It's funny because butterfly bush, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is banned as an invasive, and that's one of those plants people are like, oh, it's in my yard, I don't see it popping up anywhere, how can it be invasive? Well, there you go. That's it. It obviously wasn't planted there and showed up there. But
Shannon, what are some other plants when you get people calling you looking for advice on what they want to use on a green roof? What are some other plants that you recommend?
Yeah, well, Kate hit on several of them that are really our top ones. Is especially the warm season ones, as I mentioned, are really good at taking up water but handling dry conditions. So the Probleus she mentioned, the Muhlenbergias do well, but also having those cool season grasses like the Deschampsia. So also Deschampsia cespitosa is another one, the Flexuosa that Kate mentioned. Also, and these are more Midwestern natives, are the Boutelouas. So Bouteloua gracilis. Bouteloua curtipendula also is a really great green roof plant. You see that used quite a bit. Folks probably know Bouteloua gracilis blonde ambition, and is comes out of the Plant Select program in the Intermountain region. And so it's really loves great drainage. I mean, those Boutelouas really appreciate well-drained media, yet they can take up that water when it's present. So those do really well. I was also going back a little bit to that idea of weediness. I think also what has to be managed, as with, for example, a meadow, is what proportion of grasses and different plants, especially those reseeders. So panicum, for example, you could put on a deeper green roof, but it can reseed, especially the species, and it can come to dominate, or some of the andropogons as well. So
I was actually going to ask you that, because when you were saying warm season grasses, I started thinking of root systems. And I would, and I didn't know how challenging some of those were, like broom sedge or little blue stem. Are they successful in a green roof environment? Do they, like, I'm thinking of the root systems, but do they just adapt and find a way to work in that?
They tend to spread out. I mean, I talk a lot when I talk about grasses about that branching fibrous root system, and sure, it will go down if the soil profile will allow it, but they tend to spread out in shallower media. It's more the reseeding that can be the part where you want that balance of species. I know Kata said for her, the little blue stem, the Schizocerium scoparium, haven't done as well. And they are in the Southeast. They're not as strong as they are in some other parts of the country. I think our humidity and the fungal pressures that we have, even on a green roof, the humidity, can start to be a problem for them.
I love that you said Schizocerium. That's one that we're kind of,
that's the big debate on the show.
When we were talking about like pronouncing plant names, we joke that there's two ways to say every plant name, and I don't know if anyone really knows what, unless you were a Latin professor, which is the correct pronunciation. So we love seeing who says it which way.
Oh yeah, there are probably 3 or 4 pronunciations for that one. I'll say.
Steve Castrani from North Creek says Schizacrium, and when he said it, we're like, oh, have we been saying it wrong?
I know. Disacarium. That's. I think all bets are off on that one. We just go for it.
I just mumble my way through it, so I just trail off.
That's fine as long as you say it with conviction.
Right.
You hit all this. What's it called? My wife's an English teacher. She's gonna kill me for this. Oh, the little parts of the.
Oh, the syllables, the inflect. Yeah, which one? The accents. Well, what's so funny is little blue stem in the cultivars is the 2022 perennial plant of the year from the Perennial Plant Association. So that's been one of the funniest parts of discussions. Is like, oh my gosh, how do we talk about this with people? And we're saying, they're never going to get it if we can't decide. But hey, we'll take it.
A former employee of ours, her father-in-law loved hearing plant names, and he felt that one sounded like a disease. And he actually made shirts of like someone with like,
it was like a smiley face
with little blue stem hair, and it's like, I have Schizocerium scoparium.
Oh, exactly. Oh yeah, it's a little bit too close to schizophrenia than so it's that's a funny one.
I hate to do this, but we're hitting close to our hard time frame, so I know we have to start winding down.
Sure.
But I do have to say this: we've only scratched the surface, and there's so much more I want to learn and know about, and we have to do that. We have to do a part 2, please, at some point, sometime soon. Maybe we could do a follow up on this. So
I'm thinking the 100th episode.
Wow, what a negotiator she is, huh?
I love that idea. So, there's always a couple questions we love to ask as we wind down. And for each of you, just how did you find your way into this industry and what you're doing? What was that path like?
I'll let Kate go first.
Oh, brother. Okay. It's a long story, but I'll keep it short. So I always trace everything back to my childhood. I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania and had just like free access to just wander around. And, honestly, I didn't live in a neighborhood. And so I had a brother and a sister. I have a brother and a sister, but I was left, to kind of explore on my own. And plants were part of just like what I played with growing up. I mean, I just was surrounded by plants. I did not know the species names. I didn't really know their correct names, but I just always had my hands in plants. My father really loves trees. I just grew up with plants. And then I, in college, studied anthropology and started working in archaeology, fascinated by early humans and prehistoric environments, and really interested in that connection that maybe I was trying to understand from my childhood, of that deep connection that we have to nature. And after doing that for a little while, discovered landscape architecture and went to school, got my master's in landscape architecture, started going to cities and seeing urban areas and being fascinated by big cities and these amazing parks and the juxtaposition of nature in the city. Just got really excited about that. And then discovering green roofs as a result of that from my studies at College of Design, and then my explorations in European cities. And then I'm married to a plant ecologist who is also co-owner of the company, who loves plants. And so we started this company to basically explore this idea that wasn't really being done in the Southeast. But so that's kind of a quick timeline. But I would say what brought me here has been a foundation of like love for the land and curiosity that was never really bounded by, science or the arts. It was just always this real mixture for me. And now I find myself, creating a company that is sort of doing the same thing and trying to help restore that connection between people and nature, no matter where they live.
I love it. Yeah. Shannon, how about you?
Mine is not linear. I started my work life actually as a social psychologist. I went to graduate school, was interested in the interaction of people and the social environment. So did graduate work in that and worked as a social science researcher for a number of years. And at some point realized that was probably not my path for the rest of my life, and had meanwhile started becoming interested in plants and understanding those. I took a few courses at NC State because I was in the university system teaching and doing research, and just said, this is it. I found it. Went back to school in horticulture at NC State and started working in the industry. I had a stint at Niche Gardens, which I know native plant folks may know of, and loved it. Started working at Hoffman Nursery and have been in the horticulture industry, probably almost 20 years at this point. So it was a not linear path, as I said, but like Kate, I just, it's a passion and I love what we do and I love this industry.
And now the horticultural industry will never let you go.
Let's hope not.
That's the way it works. So we round this out with, it's always our most simple question, yet hardest question. And that is, what is your favorite native plant? Shannon, we're going to start with you because you deferred on the last one.
I know. That was this one. Bloodroot, Sanguinaria canadensis. Nice. There's just something about that flower, the fact that it is ephemeral. It just takes my breath away every spring.
Awesome choice. Have we had anyone?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Maybe once, but I'm thinking, don't think so.
Possibly Carolyn Klauba, but I don't remember.
The other thing, Fran, is now that I know that there's a files function on Facebook groups, I was like, I should probably go back and pick out everyone's favorite native plant, because we really haven't had a lot of duplicates out of
we really haven't
episodes. Yeah,
that's so interesting that you haven't. Wow.
No, it surprises me every time. I look forward to this because I'm waiting for that duplicate, and it just never happens. So no pressure, Kate, at all.
Well, I knew you were going to ask this question, and I honestly just can't do it. There are just so many. I mean, these are my friends. We're talking about the plants. I just cannot. It's like my children. I can't list a favorite. I need those like early spring violets when they arrive just as much as like the fluffy carex in the forest in the summer. Or the cheerful winter berries in the winter snow. I can't choose a favorite.
Well, the nice thing is you don't have to, because most of our guests ignore the request and list multiple. So
okay, so I will say that there's one that we just tried on a green roof that I love in some of my top favorites, and it's also an ephemeral, like Shannon. It's the Mertensia division.
Yeah. The bluebells.
Great choice. That's another one that has never been stated. So we're like batting 1,000.
Yeah,
I love it.
And then the last thing we do is just give everyone a final thought. You can promote something, tie up loose ends, really whatever you want. I'm typically end up going last, but I'm going to go first because I had something pop up in my head that's more of a question.
Oh, okay.
Is there any residential green roofs?
I had that as a question, but I'm like, we can't ask any more questions.
there are so many questions to still go through.
Oh, yeah.
And even plants. I just thought of some more for green roofs, but yes, we do. Our company does an enormous scale of projects, from very, very small residential park structure green roofs all the way to multi-story, multi-terrace, complicated, big commercial government projects, and everything in between. But we do quite a few residential projects every year.
Awesome. I just knew people were going to listen to this and be fired up and want to have a green roof on their house. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know if that's an option.
Well,
So-
I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, we're going to excite people with this one, and they're going to say, how can I do this?
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that will be episode 100.
Yeah.
Who would like to go first on a final thought? You can use this time to summarize, plug something, use it however you want to use it. We just give you the floor to use it. Whoever would like to go first. You can rock, paper, scissors.
All right.
That's
I'll
all
go
right.
first because
All right.
I'm sort of on, off the cuff, but I would say, I think I sort of speak a little bit to industry folks. I think that we as an industry have just such a tremendous opportunity to help move green infrastructure and projects like green roofs forward. And there's economic incentive for us. There's also the incentive, like, this is what these are the solutions that we have for climate change, for what's happening, for development, that this is the way forward. And plants are such an important part of that we need to be a part of every conversation that's happening at the national level, the regional level, state and city. So advocate for nature-based solutions at whatever level you are, wherever you are, please.
That's a great that's a fantastic final thought. I should have went
Yeah,
before
and
you.
I would love to piggyback on that, because Shannon just nailed it with her comment, and just that, we can do this because of climate change, and we can do this because of environmental reasons and economic reasons, but ultimately we need to be doing this for ourselves, and to also remember that this is not just about economics and the environment, but also about the tremendous reward that we get as humans connecting with our environment, and just it really comes down to humans and our connection to nature, and that this is a tremendous way to not just solve multiple climate related issues and economic challenges, but also help to really restore that connection between us and the land.
Great final thought. So I guess I have to go now.
Yeah, you're last.
Wow. I don't like that position. I think when we started this podcast, we kind of envisioned the direction it would go, and it's gone in every direction but that, which I love. So as we go through this journey, and we're all on this journey, and we're all in different phases of this journey, don't always look to the obvious of things that can be done to fix or create. This is a wonderful example of changing perception and uses and function. And it's outside the box, and it's really grown over the years. And there's so many other examples of this, that there's always a way to get involved. So even if someone's not sold on one thing, maybe this is the way to get them involved. And don't discount anything. Just it can all work. And this is just another example of a part of the journey. And I'd love to see how this progresses over time and becomes more important part of the journey, because development's not going to stop. That's pretty obvious. But how can we make that development less impactful? And this is
One way to do
it. Yeah. That's my final thoughts.
All right. Well, that is it. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed listening to Kate.
I never updated that for you. I'm sorry.
I know. And Kaya and Shannon Curry. We're going to have the links to their respective websites
on our
Living Roofs,
website,
and then Hoffman Nursery on our website in the show notes. So make sure to check them out there. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
We're going to give a big thank you to the Egocentric Plastic Men for contributing our theme music. Make sure you stream or buy their songs wherever you consume music. And now that live music is back, make sure you go see some of your favorite live artists live when you get the chance. But be safe while you're doing it. You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Pinelands Nursery, or Native Plants_Healthy Planet, and also YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. Don't forget about the question and comment line. You can call us at 215-346-6189. I will repeat that, 215-346-6189. Ask a question, leave a comment. When we play it on a future episode of The Buzz, we will answer it the best we can or defer to an expert, which is pretty much anyone other than us. And we'll have Saul weighing in with the winner of the Draw Saul contest on the next Buzz. So make sure you look for that. And we also have the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group, which just keeps growing leaps and bounds. And I was just having this conversation last night with Lori Cleveland from Sourland Conservancy, how respectful and kind and loving everyone in that group is. And we love that we've got to take a part in building that community. And you should all be proud of what you're doing and keep it going.
Yeah. You can buy T-shirts and listen to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast directly at www.nativeplants.healthyplanet.com. The T-shirts, there's a link there's a little banner at the top of the page. Just click that. It'll take you to our Teespring store. And just remember, all those designs were designed by me, but we're not getting any of the money. It's all going to nonprofits that we've had on to help support their work. 100% of what we make is going to them. When you do listen to our podcast, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're able to leave a review, please do leave a 5-star review. And if you can't leave a review, write to us and let us know what you think about us. And hopefully it's good. Thank you, everyone. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thank you again, everyone. We're going to have a Buzz episode next week. Again, it will be the winner of the Saul contest, and we're excited. It's been a while since we heard from Saul. So hopefully he picks a winner. Who knows?
Yeah.
Hopefully he's not in the hospital. It's been a while. So make sure you tune in. It will be a good one. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Kate. We appreciate your time. And until then, keep it native.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.